I'm glad that more people are coming around to the idea that what you eat is so important for your overall health.
We need to support you in what you do. There's no point in having Dr. J remake my face in some important, fabulous way if I don't support it internally.
We think of removing something from our diet, something that's pleasurable, as denying ourselves.
Yeah.
But you're saying that it's actually leading to freedom.
Once you remove those things or put them aside to the point where you just barely ever eat them, one, you don't want them anymore. They don't have enough flavor. They're not satisfying.
Interesting.
Two, it opens the door for all this other stuff that you've never tasted. And you're going to go, oh my God, how did I live without kimchi? It's great.
You Are Beautiful, podcast with Jae Kim, MD.
Welcome to the You Are Beautiful podcast with Jae Kim, MD. I'm your host, Dr. Jae Kim, a double board certified facial plastic surgeon. I am on a mission to make the world a more beautiful place. I want to start with you. There are 3 undeniable truths that you must embrace to become the most beautiful version of yourself. The first is that you are beautiful. The second is that you are unique. And the third is that you are worth it. Let's dive into today's episode. Today, I am welcoming a wonderful, beautiful person, and her name is Lynne Bowman. She is an author, and you might have seen her book on Amazon called Brownies for Breakfast. It is a bestseller on Amazon, and you have to go get it. She's also been a creative director for ad agencies, an actress, a screenwriter, an illustrator, a makeup artist, a wedding planner, and she's even forecasted the weather on TV. Lynn, thank you so much for joining me on the You Are Beautiful podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you for the invitation. I love being here. We've already talked a little bit about, I'm a fan, right? I mean, to me, plastic surgery is magic in so many ways and transformative in so many ways. And let's do this. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I hope you will ask me anything you like, because like I said, I'm a grandma. I just talk, I don't edit myself very well.
The filters are gone.
Yeah, all gone.
All right. So let's start with the question I ask a lot of my guests. How do you impact the world and make it a more beautiful place?
In so many ways. First of all, my passion is staying healthy. And anyone who comes into my sphere at all gets hit with that, because I'm a huge believer that your life and the life of the people around you is so much better if you take care of the machine, if you keep your instrument tuned. And there is so much we can do individually to keep ourselves bright and shiny and on our feet. And, there are things that happen that we can't help, of course. But it's astonishing to me how few people, it seems these days, and we've got numbers, I'm sure you do, I've got my data that I'm always looking at, how many people have chronic disease that is preventable. How many people are suffering needlessly with things that if they would eat differently, move differently, not, really straining themselves, but just have different habits, change their habits. We can do so much to stay healthy. And the other thing that, is obvious, but it's astonishing how few people really make the connection, that if you are not healthy, it's also practically impossible to stay wealthy or to stay above water, because illness costs you everything. It costs you your relationships. It costs you your properties, your money. And so Grandma here is here to remind you that you can, in so many cases, fix that. I'm a diabetic. I'm 78. And I like talking about that because, and people say, well, what kind, you mean you're a pre-diabetic or the, I'm one of those people who has blood sugar that goes out of control very quickly. So I watch it. I eat carefully. I eat wonderfully. But I'm careful about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I also work out 4 days a week, and that's huge. So all about it, Dr. J. And
Yeah.
as someone, I've already told you this, as someone who was born in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
not something I chose, but it happened. I've had plastic surgeons as good friends and on speed dial my whole life, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in a lot of businesses that are all about making yourself what you want to be to present the world. And there are lots of different ways to do that. And one of them is with a knife. Thanks to you.
I appreciate it. There is so much wisdom in your 78 years young of life. There are many situations through which you've experienced your beauty changing. And as a diabetic, as someone who has been more careful with their lifestyle, how does that tie into embracing your beauty and becoming the most beautiful version of you in these seasons of life?
I love talking about this because there's an assumption that we women, especially, just begin to fade at some point. Maybe it's 35 when your ovaries stop working well, or maybe it's 50 when you're just past menopause, whatever. In my life, I have really enjoyed the difference of the seasons. One of the lovely things about being my age is that you're no longer prey in the sense that you are when you're a young woman.
Mm.
And hopefully that will change to some extent, but maybe it won't. I don't know. And you can kind of say, well, yeah, but you're an old lady, so aren't you afraid when you go out that people will pick on you? No, because I've got an eyebrow and I know how to use it. That I know my son came home from a trip to Russia at one point, and he said, "Ma, you wouldn't believe these old ladies, these babushka. They, with their brooms on the sidewalk, they don't take cred from anybody. They run the joint." There is a wonderful strength, I think, about being older and being female. We've been there, we've done it, we've seen it. Many of us produced all kinds of people out of our bodies, and happily so. So, I actually feel better about my appearance now than I did when I was 25. Because when I was 25, everybody was, oh my God, if you weighed 2 pounds more than this or that, or if your hair wasn't doing the thing that it was supposed to be doing, or I don't know, it was just, it was kind of an oppressive need to be fabulous looking all the time. I think to a large extent, because as females back in the day, we didn't have a lot of other choices except to be as attractive as we could be. And I'm fond of saying to you young'uns, because a lot of people don't really remember, that in 1964, when I graduated from high school, my options were very limited. I couldn't go to Harvard. I couldn't go to medical school in most cases. Harvard wasn't co-ed. Women weren't going to medical school. I could be a secretary. I could be a teacher. I could be a nurse. None of those things look good to me. And so I decided to become wild instead. And that was big fun. I loved it. It was the 60s. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Wonderful. And I think some of what you're getting at, including when it comes to what you were told you could become in terms of your career, but also in terms of how people said you were supposed to appear. Those were defined by the other. They were not defined by self.
Yes.
And so I guess to some degree that contributes to self-image when you were that young versus now. And even in your 70s, some people, like you said, they feel older and they say, oh, everything's going down the drain. And but you have the complete opposite mindset, which is kind of life-changing.
We are who we are, Jay. I mean, I, as a grandma, I'm also stunned when I hold the new grandbabies, the little teeny ones, and realize that they come with a program. They're not some kind of blank slate that you're going to project all this stuff into. They arrive who they are.
Mm.
And your life with them is a process of discovering who they are.
Mm.
That's
Absolutely.
it. When I kind of came into the adult world, and I have to say, my life was largely colored by the fact that my mother died when I was 18. So
Oh.
I had an experience different from a lot of young women of that time, especially who typically had a mom all over them all the time with her expectations and her disappointments and her frustrations and so on. And I've heard those stories over and over through the years. But I didn't have a mom disappointed in me or pushing me in it, or although she may have been doing it from another dimension and I didn't know it, but and I hope maybe she was, but I was aware that I was alone in the world, and I was making the decisions about what I was going to look like, where I was going to go, what I was going to be, to the extent that I was able to do that. And being in Southern California, you can appreciate this. And I went to UCLA for 3 semesters. All the other girls who were pretty were tall and blonde and, slender and athletic and so on. And I was none of those things, right? Just none of those things. But I never really thought in terms of, well, that makes me nothing, or it just made me different, which I thought was okay. I didn't feel bad about it, but I think largely that's your community and your family projecting those feelings onto you. And I lost my community essentially and my family when I was 18. So I was on my own.
Yeah. The thing about losing such a valuable family members, like your rock, really, is that it can turn somebody for the worse. They can lose all hope and they can really go down a path that is very hard to recover from. But it sounds like the opposite happened for you, is that you, even despite that really big loss, that you harnessed the silver lining, so to speak, and you said, even though that community is not there projecting onto me or influencing me or supporting me, I'm going to go on my own. And so, especially in the 60s, that is kind of revolutionary in a way.
Well, way, but the other side of that coin is that I had been loved. I never felt unloved. I came from people who showed that they cared about me in their very kind of cold wasp way. That was the way things went then. We didn't do a lot of hugging. Nobody ever said, "I love you, honey." It wasn't like that, but I felt loved and approved of in a vague way. But I also believe that you just kind of arrive ready to fight or not. I mean, I don't know how I got to be who I am. I have no idea. And I had some big, giant, rough patches. I mean, and the other thing, Jay, that you learn as you go along, you really cannot envy anyone their life. We all are handed major, major challenges. Hard to know what they're going to look like, what they're going to be. To one person, they fail to make the team and they've ruined their life because they didn't make the team, whatever that team, whether it's the orchestra or the baseball team or whatever. In my case, I had a really horrendous marriage to a guy, a veteran who came back from Vietnam, Marine. And we married not too long after that. I had 3 little babies. He just completely unraveled, fell apart. And this is a story that you hear over and over again. But when you're in your 20s, when you're young and you're full of life and you're looking forward to having a family and so on, you don't see the red flags. You don't see that train coming down the tracks at you, right? And somehow we survived. I mean, I left North Carolina with a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and came across the country on the train in
Wow.
1980 with no money, no
Mhm.
plan, nothing
Wow.
but 3 little kids and a crazy homicidal ex who would chase me for many years.
Mm.
But
Wow.
it's very easy to look around and see other people's challenges and go, yeah, but whoa, that must have really been horrible.
Mhm. Mm.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't, we can't choose
Yeah.
particularly.
Yeah.
It happens to us and we survive it or we don't.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. That's, I imagine, a very tough time of your life that it's hard to recall. It's difficult to move on from, and yet you did. And through it, and I'm sure there are other situations that you've had to overcome, and you still found the other side. You still harnessed your own beauty and put your best self out there. So that's a really big testament to you, and really something that I think is worth emulating in today's society.
Well, I'm not alone in this. And isn't it crazy when you read in the papers about some star, some person who's achieved some kind of major victories in their life, and suddenly they've taken their own life,
Mm.
and you think, how in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know what someone is
Yeah.
suffering. We don't know what other people are going through.
Mm-hmm.
And for me at that time when I was going through the worst of this thing that I just told you about, I couldn't even tell people in business that I had children, Jay, because
Mm-hmm.
at that time there was a strong belief that, first of all, women probably couldn't do it. Second of all, women with children, no, how
Mm.
could you possibly handle that and handle this too? So,
Right.
and I landed in the Silicon Valley in 1980,
Mm-hmm.
and um, had to figure out a way forward. I had a sister, thank goodness, who was supportive, and I lived in her driveway with my kids for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I just happened to land in the Silicon Valley where they needed talent, that they needed help with these amazing technologies that were bursting forth. The microcomputer was brand new. So I had an opportunity, just because of my particular skill set. I could say, no, I can do that. I can write about those. I can help you with your marketing efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very often the only woman in the room in those
Mm.
days. And so there was a lot of suspicion thrown my way about, well, wait a minute, you don't look like a geek, you don't look like somebody who can understand what we're doing here.
Mm.
But I enjoyed that and played to it with my clients,
Yeah.
because what I was selling was, hey, you need to find a way to make your products sexy and appealing and
Mm.
fun. And they'd all go, what?
Mm-hmm.
But they got it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to bring up too is, at that time, the assignment, as it were, was to help men figure out that it was okay to put their own fingers on the keyboard. Because at that
Mm-hmm.
time, the only people who ever put their fingers on a keyboard were women. So
Interesting.
here these guys, Steve Jobs and all the guys, had these wonderful machines that you had to operate with a keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
So it became my job, and with a team, to convince men that putting their fingers on the keyboard was going to give them power, that it
Right.
was a sexy, very masculine thing to do, to put those chunky fingers on those keyboards. They were going to own the
Yes.
world. And guess what? Not necessarily because of me, but it did happen. They
Mm-hmm.
did make the transition, and now they can't get their fingers off the keyboard or get their phones out of their faces.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. That must have been a really cool time to be alive and in that area, because that was the infancy of what we know today as Silicon Valley is. Wow. When Steve Jobs
It
was
was
there,
fun.
yeah, wow. That is
Better yet, I made
unbelievable.
good money.
Yeah. Well, you were part of a big movement, so of course.
Well, right.
Mhm.
But you can imagine, I mean, I came from North Carolina to California, and all of a sudden, I mean, with all the crazy stuff, but then pretty soon I was literally making twice what I was making in North Carolina.
Mhm.
And single mother of three, that meant a lot. It meant I could live.
Yeah.
It was huge.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it wasn't all bad for sure. It's been good in many ways, not complaining.
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
And all of us made it. My kids all lived. And now they
Wonderful.
each have a child. Uh,
Mm,
and how exciting is that?
yeah. That's a beautiful thing. And I hope for children someday, and it's a little more personal on my end, is that, um, yeah, I hope to have maybe one, hopefully two someday, but we're working towards it, of course. And
I hope you do.
I hope that we can experience that joy. But yeah, thank you for sharing about your kids. Hmm.
It's been the major thing in my life. And in fact, I'm expecting my youngest daughter and her son this afternoon. Can't wait. They live in Reno, Nevada.
Hmm.
She's she's a nurse practitioner, and the source of all kinds of good, juicy information that I enjoy getting firsthand.
Yep.
And I keep talking about like an old feminist. Sorry, because I am. I'm an old feminist. But the medicine, Jay, has changed. You know this so dramatically, and I claim it's because women are the ones with the stethoscopes now.
Hmm.
Women have brought such a different point of view to medicine.
Absolutely.
When my kids were born, it was all men, all
Hmm.
telling me that they knew more about babies than I did.
Right.
I remember one guy saying, "Well, I've had 1,000 babies." Yeah, well, you haven't had any pulled out of your innards, dude.
Hmm.
And my daughters have had the experience, wonderful experience, of being surrounded by women during the births of they have lactation coaches,
Hmm.
and women who had been through it themselves and who understood the pain and all of it. And that is a thrilling transition for me,
Absolutely.
because I couldn't understand why the doctors, when my kids were, didn't see it as a spiritual event.
Hmm.
Literally two guys working over me when I had an epidural. I was absolutely conscious. They weren't used to that. And it was a C-section, and they were talking about their golf game. And
Hmm.
I let them have it. I think they're still talking about it. I was so angry. It's like,
Yeah.
this is not about your golf game. This is about the birth of my child.
Yeah.
Why? So I know I'm hollering at you, but I think
Yeah.
you have a special perspective on all of this. And as the kind of surgeon that you are, you're just seeing it from a very different point of view. Um, and you are an artist.
Oh, thank you. So when I enrolled in medical school some years ago, even then there were more females in my class than males.
Wow.
And
What year
so
was that?
that was 2007. Not too far back when. So don't let this young face fool you. And I love the idea of more women being in medicine and being in healthcare. And this is probably a generalization, but I think across the board, women have that empathy dial that is way more refined than for men. And to that effect, I mean, biologically, only women can physically have children. And so having your progeny grow in your own body for 9 months at a time, there is a bond that is unlike anything else for sure. And something I will never experience, obviously. but
But
mhm.
but fathers are being so much more invited into the process now, and emotionally allowed to be loving, caring dads and to be stay-at-home dads. I mean, there's a whole wonderful thing happening here where it's no longer the guy that just comes home with a briefcase as it was when I was a child. All good.
Yeah.
Both of my sons-in-law are wonderful dads, very involved in their kids, very loving, very affectionate. All good.
Yes.
All good. Women, when you start bleeding between your legs when you're 13, your view of the world is different, right? Because from the get-go, you've got people involved in your hormones and your body, and you're used to the invasive kind of questions and peering and look. And
Right.
I tease men, in fact, about the fact that, especially you guys in your late 40s and early 50s, you will do anything to stay away from a doctor's office to prevent any kind of a
That's right.
checkup. I mean, and it takes a real problem to get you there. And because I'm talking so much about diabetes all the time and heart disease, typically it's erectile dysfunction that actually will get you to the doctor's office.
Right.
That's what it takes.
Yeah. It's funny, and I don't know why, but I think of the movie with Jack Nicholson and Diane Keaton. And oh my gosh, I don't know why the title escapes me just now, but there's a situation where he ends up in the emergency room.
Yes.
And they say, "Do you take Viagra?" And he says no, and he says no. And then the doctor says, "I have to push this medication, and if you do take Viagra, it could tank your blood pressure so much that you could die." And he's like, okay, I do.
But it took that to get the confession.
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a PSA to everyone who goes to their doctors. You have to tell them everything, even when it comes to healthcare professionals whom you see for your beauty. It may seem vain, it may seem superficial, but your medical history is very important. Whether you've had prior surgery, whether you've had other aesthetic procedures, those are all factors in our treatment plan for you going forward. So if you've had 10 rhinoplasties and you come asking for another one, we might say, pump the brakes. What happened in those 10 that you're still not satisfied? And will you even be satisfied after an 11th surgery? Likely not. So your medical history is very important.
Discussion. I would want to know who comes in for 11 rhinoplasties. Wow. I don't know. But this is a good point at which I want to ask you, do you recommend ways of eating to your patients? Do you give them, and I don't want to call them diets, but do you give them prescribed food suggestions or not?
So as of now, there is no systematic eat this, don't eat that kind of recommendation that I give to patients. One thing I do say is, because everybody is concerned about the duration of bruising or swelling after surgery, I always say to have pineapple.
Yes,
And pineapple, exactly. And pineapple, the enzyme bromelain is in pineapple, the fruit. If you drink the juice, the bromelain's already been processed, so it's no good. I always encourage them to eat the fruit.
And I'll go further. I think it's helpful to eat it before surgery.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, eating it up to the day of surgery and for the first little while after as well. Absolutely.
Well, and I'm asking this, Jay, because my youngest is a cancer patient. She just had a recurrence, and so she's just finished her second whole round of chemotherapy, and it's been fast, and she's doing great, and she feels good, breast cancer. But I was stunned and delighted that her oncologist actually handed her a diet, and one of the main things that he wanted was no sugar. Yes, finally. And so anyone listening, if you don't already know this, know it now. If you are eating sugar, refined sugar, cane sugar, you are increasing your chances of having and growing cancer.
Wow. You heard
And
it here,
you
everyone.
argue with me. I've seen so much research
Mm,
about this, and
yeah.
it's no longer just a old wives' tale. It's apparently quite true, and to the
Mm,
point where the oncologists are saying, "Please don't eat sugar." That
wow.
makes me happy.
When I was in medical school, we heard very little to nothing about diet and its effects
Right.
on our overall health and the progression of disease. We might have heard about some nutrition, and it was very biochemistry oriented, but it didn't branch out into the overall health effects, including how it contributes to your blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, heart disease, things like
Yeah.
that. So I'm glad that more people are coming around to the idea that nutrition, what you eat, is so important for your overall health. And I
Well,
love
and
that you, go ahead.
we need to support you in what you do. There's no point in having Dr. J remake my face in some important, fabulous way if I don't support it internally.
Mhm.
Huge difference in how your skin functions,
Absolutely.
huge difference in how you look, how you
Mhm.
move. And I think a lot of us would agree that yes, it's nice to have your face altered if you want your face altered, but a big part of remaining young looking is moving in a
Mhm.
comfortable, strong way. You can spot somebody a mile away who is aging with difficulty by the way they move.
Mhm.
You don't have to see their face. It doesn't matter if they got wrinkles or not.
Mhm.
So it's all one system. It's sleep and food and movement and emotional health. And
Absolutely.
you need all those pieces.
Yeah. No, that's great. Continuing along the topic of food. So it turned out that you have diabetes and you have obviously seen and experienced the ill effects of refined sugars on our health. Tell us about how brownies for breakfast came to be.
It's an evolution, as most things are. And because I was a single mom, and because my mom had died young, I had a very up close and personal sense, young, of how important it was for me to remain on my feet. I was
Mm,
not going to leave my kids. I was going to keep on chugging. So I made it my business to find out how to do that. And when my son, my first child, was born, he was 10 pounds and he was
wow.
6 weeks late. And the doctors, I've already kind of disparaged them, I'm sorry, at the time, said to me, yeah, well, you probably had gestational diabetes. But was I tested for it? No.
Mm,
And so they said to me, you will most likely develop type 2 diabetes when you're in your 40s, which at the time seemed so far away. And when I did arrive in my early 40s, I began asking, do you want to test me? And they'd say, no, no, you're not overweight. You look fine. You don't have any complaints. And then finally someone gave, and I don't remember if it was a hemoglobin A1C at that point,
mhm,
but someone said, yeah, you're over the line. So I started work right away trying
mm,
to figure out how to stay on the correct side of the line. And it was hard to get answers, Jay. I mean, people weren't, if you're seeing a physician, they didn't really have good answers. If you were
mm.
seeing a nutritionist, she might have weighed 250 pounds. So you didn't always want to take her word for it,
I
frankly.
see.
I kept looking for information that made sense, and I kept going deeper and deeper and doing my own research. And then at the same time, because I was poor and mother of many, and also a professional woman, my social life was around my table. I was
Mm,
always cooking and serving, and the kids were there, and my friends were there, and so my superpower was developed around how do you get a healthy meal on the table in 15 minutes?
mhm.
That's all I had. Not a lot of money, no time. How do you do it?
Yeah.
And so the first book came about because I had a friend who said, you got to write this down. You need to do this. And so she got together with me and we did one called Fast, Cheap, and Skinny.
Okay.
And that was also fun because it was when desktop publishing was brand new. So we did it ourselves, which was big fun on,
Wow.
what was it called? PageMaker software.
Wow.
And then another old pal, we were sitting at her kitchen table and she said, go to Australia with me. And I said, wow, that'd be really fun. I said, but you need a book. If we're going to go to Australia, you should have a book with you. And because she's an actress and she was going to be doing appearances. And so in 6 weeks, we had a book, which we published ourselves. And I'll take 60% of the credit for doing it because it was more my bailiwick than hers. But she contributed to it. And that was Deidre Hall's Kitchen Close-Up, which was big fun.
Mm-hmm.
And her fans really loved that. So we did another one called Deidre Hall's How Does She Do It, which is more your bailiwick. It was about what is beauty? What do you mean when you say beautiful? Where does it come from? How do you develop it? Can you develop it? Rah, rah. So we had a lot of fun doing that one.
Wow.
I will send it to you if you don't have it. A valuable resource. I'm sure you'll enjoy.
I'm sure it'll reach a lot of people. Send a very good message. Mm-hmm.
Then what year was it? 2021. I just took a notion to do the book I'd always wanted to do, which is how eating healthy and eating for long life actually tastes better, looks better, is less expensive, etc., etc. Here's how to do it. So I wanted to put everything in one book that no one had ever put in one book for me. I wanted to be able to say to someone who was diabetic or headed in that direction, here you go. Here's all you need to know. It's easy. It's fast. It's not crazy. It's not, you don't need to know about the, sort of cellular processes and things. Here's what you do. Here's what you eat. Here's what you don't eat. Here's when you eat. Here's how you eat. And it's a grandma's take on the whole thing, which I've had wonderful reviews. Thank you very much. Because I think people appreciate simplicity, and fun. It doesn't have to be a drag, for Pete's sake.
Mm-hmm. And I think that busts all the preconceived notions of eating healthy, because people think it's expensive. People think it tastes bad. People think you need hours and hours to make it. So I love that platform. Mm-hmm.
And here's another little off the top tip that I love to give people, because so many people don't know. When you think alternative sweetener, what do you think? Ew, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think, sucralose and sweet and low and all these horrible things. And if you don't know there are a few alternative sweeteners that are excellent. One of them, more recently, is allulose. Bad name, terrible name, great product. Allulose, Allulose.
Yep.
I cook with it. I sprinkle it on stuff. It comes in a brown version. It comes in a powdered version. And you can use it pretty much exactly the way you've always used sugar, only you will get no blood sugar spike. Yay. And there is some research which says that it has kind of an appetite suppressing effect. And I don't know that I feel that myself, but one of the main things you need to do for your health is to, hear me out, quit sugar now. Don't feed it to your kids. Don't feed it to your grandma. Well, feed it to grandma. It's too late for her if she's 95. We have one like that. All she wants is ice cream. So, okay, Aunt Pat gets ice cream. Yeah. But if you're raising kids, if you're trying to be healthy, no sugar. And once you get that, and once you get it out of your kitchen, out of your system, all of a sudden you go, yeah, I don't need that. I really, and it doesn't taste good to you anymore. People need to understand that the chemistry of their saliva changes. And you will not crave stuff if you will quit eating the stuff and whole other discussion about the craveability industry and the big
Hmm.
food. That's another show we need to
Oh
do,
yeah,
right?
I'm sure
If you
there's some
haven't done that.
documentaries on that. That's that's really, really cool. We think of removing something from our diet, something that's pleasurable, as denying ourselves.
Yeah,
But you're saying that it's actually leading to freedom.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And when you stop eating crap, because most Americans are eating bad meat 2 or 3 or more times a day, they're
Hmm.
eating preserved meat, pepperoni. I see you in front of the TV eating your pizza. I know what you're doing.
Hmm.
Um, and we know that there's science about preserved meat being a
Hmm.
problem, being carcinogenic. So most Americans are eating too much meat, preserved meat, bad meat that comes from factory farms, not good for the cows, not good for you, none of that. And they are also eating white bread
Hmm.
all the time in different forms, crackers, chips. It's all the same. It's all over processed white flour.
Yeah.
So once you remove those things or put them aside to the point where you just barely ever eat them,
Mm.
one, you don't want them anymore. They don't have enough flavor. They're not satisfying.
Interesting.
Two, it opens the door for all this other stuff
Hmm.
that you've never tasted. And you're going to go, oh my God, how did I live without kimchi? It's great.
Hmm.
And here's one for you. One of my
Hmm.
favorites, Jay. I don't know if you are a giant kimchi eater or if you left that behind at some point,
Oh,
but
we
I
still
love
have
to
it.
make a what I call a kim cheese sandwich. I make it with sliced goat cheese, great bread from really good flour and lots of
Mm.
seeds, sourdough. I toast the bread with the cheese on top of it, and then I put kimchi in a layer between the two pieces. And so you've got
Hmm.
squishy goat cheese and lovely, the kimchi that I love is called smoke show. So that kind of
Okay,
tells you where it's
I'll
coming
look for
from.
that. Hmm.
And so and of course, you're getting this great probiotic effect from the
Mm.
kimchi. You're eating cabbage,
Yes.
great food.
Hmm.
It's all good, good, good. And plus, I promise you, when you've eaten that kimchi sandwich, you know you've had food. You're good
Yeah.
for some time. You will
Hmm.
not be in the kitchen scratching around looking for something to eat in 2 hours. You're
Yes.
good.
And there's been a Netflix series on it recently called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And I think there's a book
Mm-hmm.
of that title as well. And that kimchi's sandwich includes everything. There's
It's
salt,
all there.
there's fat, acid, and heat. And
Yeah.
so it's a perfect combination.
Yeah. It's delicious.
Hmm.
So good. And also, your eating process, and I'm always hollering at people, don't be eating your food in the back of a car or behind a steering wheel. Sit down with a plate, with a napkin, with utensils, right?
Hmm.
Because all of that helps feed your body in a very real way.
Right.
And if you make it a
Mm.
bit of a ritual and if you make it beautiful, I actually had a kimchi sandwich this morning for my breakfast. And
Wonderful.
even though I've done it often, I looked at that sandwich and said, this is so gorgeous. Look at the color. It's
Mm.
so beautiful. And your eyes need to eat too. And the
Interesting.
fragrance
Yeah.
is what feeds
Mm.
you too.
Hmm.
The texture of the food feeds you. And so you give up most of that when you eat something that you've driven through for and you eat out of a paper bag, and that's
Mm.
bad.
Right.
That's trash.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, what I'm hoping for you is that you take the full sensual beauty from whatever you're eating and put it inside. That's going to show, I promise you.
Mm. I love that. And it's not about just the taste of it. It's about the tactile. It's about the
Mhm.
smell. It's about the visual. And I submit also along with texture, maybe some of the hearing, the oral sensation of the food as well.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, food is about connection.
Mm.
Food is love. So if you make that kimchi sandwich for yourself and somebody else, and you share it at a table, that totally amplifies the effect.
I really like that. Food is love. And going back to when you were raising your three children in North Carolina, maybe there was not as much room for you to spend quantity time with your kids, but every time you sat at a table with food, that was love.
And the whole time in California, when I was raising them and they were teenagers, our life at table was so important because that was our time to be together.
Mm.
And my kids now have told me, Jay, that, and I didn't think about it at the time, but they've all told me that that was kind of a graduate course for them in business because they were hearing it. They were seeing my interactions with my clients and who were my friends, and they were hearing all about strategies, marketing strategies, and all these things. And they were hearing about things that happened at the office that shouldn't have happened, and things that were great that have. So they carried all that away with them into their careers in a very
Right.
meaningful way. I didn't mean that to be educating them in a strict sense of the word. But as
Mm-hmm.
parents, you're always educating your kid for good or ill.
Yes. That's a very good tidbit. And when it comes to what your children absorbed about business, about life, that goes very far for them. In terms of self-esteem, in terms of beauty, what were some of the conversations you had at the table
About beauty,
about, yeah, beauty and their self-image?
it's interesting. I can't think of a specific that. I think my kids have always teased me and thought it was funny that I cared as much as I did about keeping my nails done and keeping my hair done and all those things. They weren't seeing that, I think, at a lot of other homes that they were in.
Okay.
It was always important to me. I wanted to have every advantage that I could have, and I
Mm-hmm.
assumed that my appearance was either going to be an advantage or a disadvantage. So
Right.
to me, I mean, small thing. When you look at me right now, I've got my hair off my face.
Mm-hmm.
A thing I've always wanted to say to so many women is, you have to get your hair off your face
Mm-hmm.
if you want people to take you seriously,
Mm.
because it's an animal thing. When you hide behind hair, that tells your client or your friends or your audience something that you may not want to be telling them.
I
And
see.
young young girl, I mean, so probably the answer is, oh my god, they heard about it endlessly, but it was so omnipresent at the table that I didn't ever think of it as explaining anything to them. I think it's true that particularly my daughters didn't grow up thinking that life was all about them being pretty or not pretty, or
Right.
looking one way or another. I just wanted them to understand that people were always looking at them, so
Mm.
they needed to be in control of what they were saying by their appearance.
I see.
Make a conscious decision to look how you want to look. Don't look some way by accident, or because you don't care, or because you don't know any better.
Mm.
Choose how you present
Got it.
and be educated as to what that means, how to present in a way that works well for you.
Mm. I think that kind of line of thought ties in well with our idea of you are worth it, and that is our third core tenet of my office, is that you are worth it. And so it is one thing to believe it yourself, and it's another thing to present that to the world, so that the way that you present yourself shows the world that I believe that I'm worth it. Even something as simple as getting your hair out your face and showing your entire appearance, I think ties in really well with that.
You are absolutely worth it. And, this has always been a challenge. I don't know whether I can say for women more than men because I've never been a man, at least in this life. But coming from a time when I think it was more extreme that women were being judged constantly in ways that maybe weren't fair or they weren't ready for. Yes, you are worth it. And, it's a mystery in a way, Jay, why some of us kind of come into the world thinking that we are worth it and that we matter. And some of us struggle from the get-go to think that, and it's a conversation that I've had with women my age, friends my age, about anxiety. Where does anxiety come from? How is anxiety born? Is it a physiological thing that has to do with our heartbeat or our brain signals or something? And I'm going to say something a little odd, so bear with me. I
Go
don't
for it.
seem to have anxiety. I've never particularly had anxiety. I might have given it to some people. But I didn't seem to suffer myself. Yeah. And I don't know if that's a gift from my parents. We, as little kids, we were feral. We were let out the door in the morning and we went out and climbed trees and found snakes and made forts and did all these things. And our parents had no idea where we were, what we were doing. They were smoking Pall-Malls and drinking Manhattans in the kitchen on their Formica tables. They didn't know. We were just kids, right? And then we'd come home at night and get dunked in the water and put to bed. And the bright side of that is we got to prove ourselves in the world early.
Yeah.
We became survivors as 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 7-year-olds, especially if you had older siblings like I did.
Of course.
Because you had to defend yourself against those older siblings. And there was no talk about emotions or, feelings or anything. You didn't have feelings. Come on. What's a feeling for? And now I see my kids going through raising their kids, and it's all about feelings and emotions and feeling your emotion and all those things. Well, I didn't have any of that. So in a way, it's kind of freeing, and I always thought I was worth it. As a 3-year-old, I think I thought I was worth it. I couldn't understand why other people didn't think I was worth it, because it's like, hey, wait, I'm okay. So I am not any kind of an expert to speak about that, except that I'm so happy that people like you, with your art and your expertise, can help reinforce for some people that, yes, they are worth it. And getting your exterior altered in some positive way is not going to always fix what's inside.
Right.
But it's going to help, maybe.
Yeah. And that's one of my main criteria for patients, is that if you know that there is some part of you already that is beautiful, you're much more likely to have a good outcome than if you cannot find any part of your appearance that you like, or any part of your person that you feel like is worth it. And I think that even, especially these days, people are more in tune, and it's more deemed common to talk about feelings because of the way that social media is such a big part of our lives now. And unlike in your childhood, when running out and playing was the norm, now sitting around the house doom scrolling is the norm. And as kids, you see your parents do it. And as parents, you want your kids to sit in front of the iPad so they behave, that sort of thing. And so when you're not out facing the world, you're mired more in perhaps ways of thinking that will lead you down such things as anxiety, as depression, as poor self-image. And so I think that's a big epidemic these days of our generation.
That's what I'm reading for sure. Do you prescribe for your patients some counseling along with their surgery? How does that work?
So for people who I don't feel like are ready emotionally or psychologically to undergo a transformation, I will say no. In terms of they are coming around to that part of their persona that says, I'm ready for this, I advise them to seek counseling sometimes, to get plugged in with community, with their family, the emotional support that they lean on in times of difficulty. Because if you don't have that, any transformation of here is not only difficult to grasp for yourself, it's especially tough through the recovery of you'll always have questions like, why did I do this? Did I do the right thing? What's it for? And I always tell people that if you're not doing it for yourself, and I think you alluded to this earlier, if you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the wrong reason.
The thing I'm reading about now too, and getting ready to do this show with you today, I started thinking about all of the times I've been under the knife and for what reasons, because again, at my age, there've been a lot, and I've had wonderful outcomes every time, and I am grateful for y'all and what you do. And one of the things I'm reading now is that breast reductions, of which I had 2, because the first one was not enough. Because there was this belief that, well, why would you want less than, some real boobs? It's so freeing not to be hauling around that big chest full of breasts. It's so freeing for women. And I have read that is the happiest outcome of any surgeries, breast reduction. And the number of them is going up as opposed to augmentations, which are talked about more. But I just wanted to put in a word for breast reductions. Great idea. And then another time that it worked out great for me was when I had a hysterectomy. I was 50, and I asked if I could have a plastic close for me. Yep. And she said, oh, absolutely. And we pulled in a plastic surgeon to do a nice little tummy lift after so all at one time. Yay.
Yes.
Because we use our bodies hard. We ask a lot of our bodies. And when you can give back a little bit, it's great. And I've had blephs and, I don't know what else, a little lipo thing years and years ago. And it's all been a treat, like, yay, isn't that nice? It's a gift you can give yourself that is kind of priceless, I think. Because if you are happy with what's going on outside, certainly it helps be happy with what's going on the inside. I mean, the two work together very well. So, and it's not a matter, Jay, of looking younger, is it? It's looking healthy and fresh and not too tired. But again, let's put a word in for you got to sleep. None of this matters if you don't get your sleep, because the only time we heal is when we are in deep sleep, right?
Sleep is so important.
I didn't
Absolutely.
learn that until kind of late in life, because we go into adulthood and parenthood and medical school believing that sleeping is for wimps.
Right.
And not true. Sleep needs to be recreational and deep and fun and long enough. So sleep, movement, and I'm now doing strength training, which most women don't have a lot of experience with. I didn't. It's really effective, isn't it? And here's my research question for you. Here's what I want you to be able to tell me.
Yeah.
Can women over 75 build bone? If so, how?
Ah, this is a great question because osteoporosis is a very real thing, and especially in that age group. So, with weight bearing exercise, you can definitely maintain and
That
possibly
wasn't the
even
question.
gain. Uh-huh.
The question is, can women over 75 build bone?
I don't see why not.
Very little research.
Mm-hmm.
I did find one study that said that topically applied estradiol and progesterone can give you something like a 3% bump.
Topical. Oh, wow. Not even a pill.
No, no.
Wow.
When it comes to the hormones, you don't want to send it through your liver.
I see.
Listen to me telling Doc here, but
I'm always learning for sure.
well, and isn't it great that people like me can get our hands on these studies now? I mean, how much do we love AI for that?
Right.
It's fun doing these little deep dive research projects. But what I'm finding, and you can appreciate this, is first of all, the studies were never done. No studies were done on women, hardly. It was
Right.
always men, and men who were medical students very often. So we are way behind in understanding the female body aging, which, surprise, it's interesting to me. That's what I want to
Of
know.
course.
And what I'm finding is, of course, there's Fosamax, and what's the other one? Those
I forget the name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they have a horrible reputation by this point because the side effects can be really nasty. And so there is this question. And of course, when you ask typical medical advice, how does a woman over 75 protect her bones? Well, what it says is, don't fall. Make sure your home is safe so you don't fall. Well, right. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, how do we build bone? So, and we think that strength, weight bearing exercise will protect bone, but can you build bone with it? So find out for me.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I want to know, and lots of other women want to know.
Yeah, that's a very important topic for sure. And it's important for our mobility, our ability to ambulate for our entire lives. For me, when it comes to bone mass and density, some of that pertains to our aging face. And one of the things that happens is our bones actually get thinner in our face over time, not to mention the soft tissue in the skin as well. So very important topic, absolutely.
It's fascinating to me. And usually when you see on YouTube the longevity stuff, it's always some guy in a muscle t-shirt, right? Who's 35. And he's talking about longevity. And you know how that sounds to me. So,
live a few more years, then tell
listen,
me.
bro. Listen up, dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got your longevity right here.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. It's a great pleasure speaking with you because you've seen it all. You've done it all.
Not yet. I'm still working on it.
Well, you've seen a lot and you've done a lot. Yeah. I guess that's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
So in terms of eating beautifully, in terms of sleeping beautifully, it's all got to be there. Absolutely. So what other things are you doing regularly to put your most beautiful self out there?
Well, one of the privileges I have at this age is I can invite anybody I want to come and sit under my magnolia tree with me and talk. Because to me, a conversation, a real conversation, deep and meaningful and honest, and with some lovely refreshment and a beautiful spot. I mean, what is there in life that is more magical than that. That's what I'm all about. I love it. And I have some wonderful friends who have also lived interesting and some of them long lives. I have one friend particularly who's 96, and I love hearing her, who's a
Wow.
healer. And I love hearing her stories. And of course, she makes me feel like a youngster, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to me, conversation is everything. That's how we learn. That's how we heal. That's how we love people.
Mm.
And food and conversation, oh, great
Absolutely.
combination. That's
Mm.
it. And music
Mm-hmm.
and food and conversation is even better. So
Absolutely.
beautiful space, which is precious to me. I love decorating and restoring old buildings and so on. So the music, the space, the food, the company, that isn't that everything?
Yeah. Yeah. That's all you can ask for. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. Absolutely. And there's something timeless about that, regardless of what era you're living in. There's something timeless about meeting face to face, breaking bread, sharing food, having a deep conversation. The music can change, of course, depending on the decade or year, but yeah, there's something about that. It's just the perfect harmony, literally.
There's research too about singing, and what
Mm.
it does to our physiology and our longevity and all that. And if I had to do over again with my kids, we tried with music, but it was so hard getting any extracurricular activities in and staying with it. One of the things, I mean, the two things I think that children learn in school or in classical lessons, one is language.
Hmm.
Every kid should have the privilege of more than one language.
Right.
It's only when you speak another language that you put yourself in another person's shoes, I think,
Mm.
culturally.
Hmm. I
So
like that.
I'm happy that my children came to adulthood, all three of them, with at least one additional language beside English.
Wonderful.
But then the other thing is music.
Mm.
I couldn't give them enough music. I would like to have given them more music because
Hmm.
the homes that you're in or that you share where the parents sing with the children or play musical instruments with the children, that's huge. It's such
Mm.
an education, isn't it?
Right. Right.
In so many ways. It's
I love that.
just the best. I mean, my granddaughter, Helen, is quite tiny, but one of my joys was seeing her with a bass guitar in a little group doing rock and roll, just this teeny little thing,
Oh.
great big bass guitar, and she was rocking.
Oh.
Um, that's such an important, a great experience for kids, and whether you have instruments or not. So, one of the gifts I like to give my grandchildren is musical instruments.
Hmm.
They don't have to be
Wonderful.
fancy, but we all need to be singing and
Mm.
playing and deeply enjoying the music that's out there for us. And I love roots music in addition to the Sibelius kind of thing.
Yes. Thank you for
And
listening, by the way. I appreciate that.
well, you play so beautifully, and that's a piece that's particularly wonderful.
Mm. Absolutely.
But I think a wonderful thing about living in this time right now is that I can get whatever music I want on my system. I can
Yep.
write in the name of an artist, and boom, there's that artist's music, and I can play it on a wonderful. I mean, that's a miracle, isn't it?
Hmm. Yep. We don't have to go buying vinyls or 8 tracks or cassette tapes anymore.
No, and you don't have to drag somebody home with a fiddle and a group. You can
Mm.
have it on the machine. So our machines are good for something,
Yes.
definitely. But Yeah. Having the phone in our faces all the time, not a good thing. No, I'm not for that.
Right.
Not a good
Yeah.
look. I feel very privileged to have you on my screen in my studio. That's why I do the podcasting. It's so fun to meet people I would never be able to meet otherwise.
Right.
And this is much better than me being, under the knife, right? And highly sedated. So I really get to talk with you. I'm enjoying it a lot. And if you suddenly go, I wonder what Lynn has to say about this or that. Anytime, I'm happy to go again. I try and be super selective about who I work with, and this is real dear to my heart, as you can tell. I'm
Absolutely.
all about it.
The privilege is all mine, Lynn. I really appreciate your agreeing to be on this podcast and share your experience, share your perspective on eating beautifully, sleeping beautifully, just being in community and creating something wonderful.
That's what you do too, isn't it? You create
Yes,
something wonderful.
it is a privilege, and it's one that I want many, many patients to experience. Even if you don't have surgery, even if you do want to do something that's a little less invasive, or even if you just want to make your skin feel better, that's something that my team can take care of. Besides the book Brownies for Breakfast, anything else that you've created that you would like to highlight today?
Just, I have a YouTube channel. You can go and see some past stuff on YouTube, recipes, tips. People can sign up on my list on my website. So lynnebowman.com. And you can send me a message, whatever. I love it when people send me pictures of the recipes that they've done from my book and so on, or ask me questions. I'm available that way. But other than that, no. The book is available on Audible and
Great.
as an ebook and as a paperback and a hardback. And
Wonderful.
people seem to enjoy the Audible. I mean, a cookbook that you listen to? But people seem to groove on it. It's lots of stories in it. And to my way of thinking, if it's not simple enough for me just to tell you, like I read my kimchi sandwich recipe to you, right? It's simple. And so most of the stuff in my book is like 2 ingredients, 4 ingredients, really, really simple. So I promise you it's a good listen if you want the Audible version.
All right. So for those of you watching on YouTube and listening on the platforms, we'll leave those links below for Lynn's book, her website, and how to get in touch with her. Lynn, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, showing your beautiful self to the world, making a great impact, especially for those who have diabetes, to eat healthy and to encourage a healthy overall lifestyle, to put your most beautiful self out there. We really had a wonderful conversation, and I'm looking forward to when this gets put online.
Me too. Thanks, Jay.
So thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the You Are Beautiful podcast with Jae Kim, MD. I had such a great time discussing all things beauty, food, sleep, even bone health with Miss Lynne Bowman on today's episode. We're going to leave all the appropriate links for her, including her website, including her Audible book, in the description below. Again, my thanks to Lynne Bowman. And until next time, remember these 3 core tenets. You are beautiful, you are unique, and you are worth it. Take care.